Your hands are cold right now. Not cold the way they get after you step outside in January, but cold the way they have been for the past 3 years. Sitting in a warm house, doing nothing wrong, eating your flavorless, salt stripped meals, doing everything your doctor asked you to do. You climb one flight of stairs and your lungs feel like wet paper bags. You sit down at your last checkup and the cuff tightens, and then the nurse gets that look, that careful, diplomatic look. She writes the number down, and you already know it is higher than last time. It is always higher than last time. And the worst part is not the number. The worst part is that you have been trying. You have been trying harder than most people half your age. You gave up sodium. You take your supplements. You walk when your knees let you. You do everything the standard cardiovascular health conversation tells you to do, and your circulation is still falling apart, quietly, steadily, and your doctor has no explanation for you except another prescription, another warning, another referral. What I am about to tell you is not on the supplement shelf at your pharmacy. It is not in the pamphlet your cardiologist hands you. It is not trending on any health podcast that takes advertising money from supplement brands, which is most of them. What I am about to tell you is a structural, biological truth about your blood vessels that the cardiovascular supplement industry has a profound financial interest in burying, because the moment you understand it, you will never spend another dollar on the single most overhyped and scientifically useless cardiovascular supplement ever marketed to adults over 50. I want you to stay with me for the next several minutes because there are two things you do not yet know. The first is the real reason your circulation is deteriorating, and it has nothing to do with sodium, cholesterol levels, or the number of steps you walk. The second is a precise molecular protocol that does what every standard cardiovascular supplement promises but biologically cannot deliver. Both answers are coming. Neither one requires a prescription. Let me take you inside your blood vessels, because this is where the real story is happening, and almost nobody is telling it accurately. Imagine your favorite non-stick pan, a quality pan, freshly coated, treated properly, with that smooth Teflon surface that lets everything glide across it without catching, without sticking, without resistance. That is exactly what the inside of a healthy blood vessel looks like at the microscopic level. The inner wall of every artery and vein in your body is coated with a living, biological structure called the endothelial glycocalyx. You will not hear your primary care physician mention this term. It is not part of standard cardiovascular intake conversations, but in vascular biology research, it is considered one of the most critically important structural features of the entire circulatory system, and its degradation in adults over 50 is one of the most well-documented and most completely ignored drivers of cardiovascular decline happening in millions of bodies right now. The glycocalyx is not just a surface coating. It is a dense, gel-like mesh of sugar-protein chains sitting on top of the endothelial cells that line your vessel walls. Under a microscope, it looks like a lush forest canopy, millions of tiny filaments reaching into the bloodstream, creating a perfectly frictionless surface that allows blood to move through your vessels without ever touching the actual vessel wall. But here is the critical detail that changes everything. The glycocalyx is not passive. It is a factory. Embedded in this microscopic Teflon layer are the enzymes responsible for producing nitric oxide, the single most important vasodilatory molecule in the human body. When blood flows across the intact glycocalyx, the mechanical shear of that movement triggers the glycocalyx to signal the endothelium to release nitric oxide, which causes your smooth muscle cells to relax and your arteries to dilate, flooding your heart, your brain, your fingers, and your feet with fresh, oxygenated blood. Now, here is what happens after decades of living in an oxidatively stressful environment, which means every decade past 40 if you live anywhere near pollution, processed food, inflammatory cooking oils, chronic sleep disruption, or even intense psychological stress. Oxidative damage begins literally scratching away the Teflon. Free radicals, circulating inflammatory markers, elevated blood glucose, and excess cortisol act like steel wool dragged repeatedly across your biological non-stick surface. The glycocalyx thins. The filaments shorten and collapse. That lush canopy becomes sparse and brittle. The nitric oxide factory shuts down floor by floor, and what you are left with is no longer a smooth, frictionless tube. You are left with something that behaves more like a rusted, corroded pipe. The vessel wall is now exposed. Inflammatory particles, oxidized cholesterol, circulating proteins, they all find purchase on that raw, sticky interior surface. Arterial stiffness accelerates. Blood pressure climbs because your heart is now working against structural resistance that should not exist. Your extremities run cold because the vessels feeding them cannot dilate adequately. You climb a flight of stairs and your cardiovascular system cannot respond fast enough to the oxygen demand because the entire nitric oxide signaling infrastructure has been eroded from the inside out. This is your biology right now. Not a moral failure, not a dietary failure, a structural one. And the solution the cardiovascular supplement industry has been selling you for 20 years does not address this structure at all. I want you to stay with me through what I am about to reveal next, because it is going to explain where your money has been going and exactly why you feel no better despite spending it. L-arginine. If you have ever looked into circulation supplements, heart health stacks, or pre-workout formulas marketed toward older adults, you have encountered this amino acid. It is everywhere. It is cheap to manufacture, easy to market, and the basic biochemical logic sounds reasonable at first. L-arginine is the direct precursor to nitric oxide. Give the body more L-arginine, the body makes more nitric oxide, the arteries dilate, circulation improves, the logic is clean, the biology is a complete disaster. Here is the clinical reality that the supplement brands printing L-arginine on glossy labels absolutely do not want you to understand. When you swallow an L-arginine capsule, it enters your gastrointestinal tract, where it immediately encounters an enzyme called arginase. Arginase does one thing. It degrades L-arginine. Research published in peer-reviewed pharmacology literature confirms that arginase activity in the gut and liver destroys more than 80% of orally ingested L-arginine before it ever reaches systemic circulation. More than 80%. You are paying for a supplement where at best, 20% of the active compound survives the journey from your stomach to your blood. And in adults over 50 whose gut microbiome has shifted, whose liver enzyme activity has changed with age, whose arginase expression is often elevated due to chronic low-grade inflammation, the survival rate is frequently lower than that. But the degradation problem is only part of the catastrophe. What actually crosses into your bloodstream from a standard L-arginine supplement is not meaningfully elevating vascular nitric oxide levels in the endothelium. The endothelial cells synthesizing nitric oxide from the glycocalyx are not reaching into systemic circulation to pull amino acids from your blood. They are operating on localized substrate availability. And the gastrointestinal side effects, the bloating, the cramping, the digestive disruption that many people report from high-dose L-arginine supplementation, those are the biological consequences of unmetabolized amino acid sitting in a gut that cannot process it effectively. You are spending money to experience gastrointestinal distress while your nitric oxide levels remain unchanged and your glycocalyx continues to erode. That is the L-arginine story. It is a market built on a mechanism that sounds functional and performs poorly at the biological level your body actually requires. Now I need to show you the evidence because this is where the narrative becomes irrefutable. A landmark clinical investigation conducted at the University of Dundee examined the comparative plasma kinetics of orally administered L-arginine versus L-citrulline, and the findings were not subtle. Oral L-citrulline produced sustained plasma arginine elevations that were significantly greater than those achieved by an equivalent dose of oral L-arginine itself. Let me say that again clearly. Taking citrulline raises your blood arginine levels more effectively than taking arginine. The reason is molecular. L-citrulline is not a substrate for arginase. The enzyme that destroys L-arginine in your gut and liver has no meaningful activity against L-citrulline. So, citrulline passes through your entire digestive system completely intact, reaching your kidneys, where a separate enzymatic process called the citrulline-arginine pathway systematically and continuously converts it into L-arginine directly within the cells that need it most, including the endothelial cells of your blood vessel walls. Research teams in Japan studying cardiovascular markers in middle-aged and older adults administered daily L-citrulline and measured brachial artery flow-mediated dilation, a direct clinical assessment of endothelial function, as well as aortic stiffness indices. The results showed measurable improvement in both metrics after consistent use. A separate study from the Faculty of Health Sciences in Tenri, Japan, found that supplementation with citrulline improved arterial compliance, meaning the vessels became more flexible and responsive, qualities directly associated with the health and integrity of the endothelial glycocalyx. These are not fringe findings from obscure journals. These are peer-reviewed, replicated findings sitting in the published literature, while the supplement industry continues printing L-arginine on bottles and selling the physiological fiction that the precursor molecule and the bypassing molecule perform, equivalently in a living human gut. But citrulline alone is only half of the precision protocol I am building toward, because there is a second biological problem standing between your supplementation and lasting vascular benefit, and solving it requires understanding the molecular instability of nitric oxide itself. Nitric oxide is a gas, a reactive, unstable, extraordinarily short-lived gas. In physiological conditions, a nitric oxide molecule survives for somewhere between 1 and 10 seconds before it is quenched by oxidative species circulating in your bloodstream. In an aging body with elevated systemic oxidative stress, which describes the inflammatory biochemical environment of the vast majority of adults over 50, this survival window is even shorter. This means that even when you successfully generate nitric oxide through the citrulline pathway, much of it is instantly neutralized by free radicals before it has the opportunity to diffuse into your smooth muscle cells and trigger meaningful vasodilation. You are manufacturing a molecule with a 10-second clock in an environment that is aggressively trying to destroy it before it can do its job. This is precisely why Quercetin Phytosome is not a bonus in this protocol. It is a biological necessity. Quercetin is a polyphenolic antioxidant found naturally in onions, capers, and several plant foods, and its free radical scavenging capacity has been extensively documented. But standard quercetin has its own absorption problem. Like L-arginine, conventional quercetin has notoriously poor oral bioavailability, typically in the range of 1 to 3%, because it is hydrophilic and cannot easily cross the lipid bilayer membranes of intestinal cells. The phytosome delivery system solves this by binding quercetin molecules to phospholipid complexes, specifically phosphatidylcholine, which dramatically increases intestinal absorption. A study published in the journal Phytotherapy Research confirmed that Quercetin Phytosome demonstrated significantly higher plasma bioavailability compared to standard quercetin extract, meaning the antioxidant protection actually reaches your bloodstream in therapeutically relevant concentrations. Once Quercetin Phytosome is circulating at adequate levels, it creates a sustained antioxidant environment in the bloodstream and in the vascular endothelium that functions as a biological shield around your newly generated nitric oxide. By neutralizing the superoxide and hydroxyl radicals competing to quench your nitric oxide supply, quercetin extends the effective half-life of the nitric oxide being produced through the citrulline pathway. The vascular response, which without antioxidant support might last minutes, is extended to a sustained window that researchers have estimated can persist for 10 to 12 hours under adequate antioxidant conditions. You are not just opening your arteries, you are keeping them open long enough to matter. Here is the exact protocol. I am calling it the Vascular Flush, and you need to implement it with precision to get the results the science supports. Every morning, before you eat anything, before coffee, before water, if you can manage it, you take 3 to 4 grams of pure, free-form L-citrulline. Not citrulline malate, which is a workout formulation with malic acid that changes the absorption dynamics. Pure L-citrulline. Free-form powder dissolved in 2 to 3 ounces of room temperature water gives you the fastest gastric transit and the cleanest kidney uptake. The empty stomach matters. Competing amino acids from a protein-containing meal will crowd the transport channels your citrulline needs to reach the kidneys efficiently. Give it at least 45 minutes of clear transit time before consuming anything else. Simultaneously, in the same glass or immediately after, you take 500 milligrams of quercetin phytosome. This is not optional, and it is not interchangeable with standard quercetin extract. The phytosome forms specifically. The antioxidant shield must be circulating while your citrulline is being converted. If you take them at different times, you lose the protective overlap window during peak nitric oxide generation. For the first 2 weeks, take this stack on its own without additional supplements in the same window. Other antioxidants and polyphenols at high doses can compete for the same absorption pathways as quercetin phytosome. You want clean, uncompeted absorption during your establishment phase. After 2 weeks, you can reintroduce your other morning supplements at least 30 minutes after your vascular flush protocol. If you exercise, time your protocol so that the peak citrulline conversion window, which occurs roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours after consumption, aligns with the beginning of your physical activity. The combination of exercise-induced shear stress on the glycocalyx and elevated circulating nitric oxide availability creates a synergistic vasodilatory response that is meaningfully greater than either stimulus alone. Your aging vessels need mechanical and biochemical input simultaneously to begin rebuilding glycocalyx integrity over weeks of consistent application. Hydration matters in this protocol in a specific way. Nitric oxide-driven vasodilation increases the volume your circulatory system needs to fill effectively. If you are operating with even mild dehydration, the vasodilation happens, but blood pressure can dip transiently in ways that feel like lightheadedness. Drink at least 16 ounces of water in the 2 hours following your protocol, not during, after. Now, here is what I want you to do starting tomorrow morning, and I am being specific because vague health advice is how the mainstream health conversation keeps you confused and dependent. Throw away your L-arginine, not in a drawer, in the bin. It is costing you money and protecting you from nothing. Source: pure L-citrulline powder and quercetin phytosome capsules from a manufacturer that provides a certificate of analysis confirming purity and the absence of heavy metal contamination. Third-party testing is non-negotiable with amino acid powders, as cheap manufacturing sources frequently contain impurities that undermine the clean biochemistry you are trying to create. I am issuing you a 14-day circulation reset challenge. Day 1, measure your resting morning blood pressure before your protocol, sitting quietly for 5 minutes, then record the number. If your hands and feet run cold, rate the coldness on a simple scale from 0 to 10 and write that down too. Time how long it takes you to feel genuinely winded on your regular walk or stair climb. Write all 3 numbers in the same place. Then begin the protocol. Repeat those 3 measurements on day 7 and day 14, same conditions, same time of morning, same activity. The changes you will observe in those 14 days are not placebo. They are measurable hemodynamic responses to restored nitric oxide availability in vessels that have been starved of it for years. If you see a meaningful shift in any of those 3 markers, I want you to share this video with someone you care about who is white-knuckling a low-sodium diet and still watching their blood pressure creep upward at every checkup. They deserve this information. The cardiovascular supplement conversation has failed them, and you now have the biological truth to offer something better. Protect this channel by hitting subscribe and the notification bell before you close this tab, because what I am revealing next is going to make everything you think you know about metabolic health after 50 collapse. In the next video, I am exposing the single breakfast habit that 70% of people over 50 follow every morning, believing it supports stable energy and healthy weight. And the research shows it is actually accelerating a specific inflammatory cascade in the pancreatic beta cells that drives insulin resistance faster than almost any dietary choice you could make. The mechanism involves a hormone almost nobody is measuring, a timing window most people are violating without knowing it, and a 3-minute morning swap that rewires your entire metabolic clock. You do not want to miss that.